Hey, friends, welcome to another edition of our Fireside Chat on race, truth, and reconciliation. Listen, we have been in this teaching series for a number of weeks, and there's only so much that we can get into on a Sunday morning. So we had to create an outlet for us to get into additional content, kind of like 60 Minutes does, 60 Minutes overtime, if you will. If you're a big 60 Minutes fan like I am, you know what that is. And so that's really what these fireside chats have been. No, we're not near a fire, but we've been having amazing conversation. And I'm so excited for this conversation on today because I get the honor to have a conversation with not only one of my favorite preachers and teachers and people, but also one of my closest friends, a man that I have come to know and love over many, many years. He's just a phenomenal individual. Many of you know him. He's no stranger to the worship center. I'm talking about Bishop DeAndre Salter. But to some of you who may be new to who this kingdom assassin is, that's what he is. He's not a kingdom agent. He's a kingdom assassin. He is an amazing pastor, pastors the Impact Church in New Jersey. But, you know, ministry in many ways, while it's kind of been in his family, him being in the pastorate is really second vocation for him is the word I'm looking for, because his bread and butter has been business and finance, and has just got an amazing testimony. He's been in many ways a financial mentor for me, and I'm always bouncing ideas off of him personally because he's just that wealth of knowledge. And so today we're going to get into this subject of the wealth gap and what we ought to be thinking about now as it relates to money, but particularly on this subject of race, truth, and reconciliation. So first of all, Bishop Salter, let me welcome you to this fireside chat. Thank you, brother, all the way in New Jersey for being a part of this conversation.
Bishop Moody, it's my honor. And let me just say this. I really have enjoyed this series. As I've told you privately, I'll tell you publicly. One of my favorite. I think you have done an excellent job of balancing information with revelation, and you hit it out the park. And I really love the fireside chats, as you said, 60 minutes over time. And what I really hope that your people appreciate, and all those that are in your sphere of influence, is how you understand what it takes to build platform, and that God gives you large platform so that more people can fit on the stage. And you're such a kingdom general in that aspect. You expand platforms and share platforms. And I thank you for sharing this platform with me to talk to you about an issue that is near and dear to both of our hearts. So thank you so much for being a friend and a brother.
Hey, man, brother. Well, you know, we love you, man. So let's jump into the conversation. Now, you know, I wanted to talk about this in particular because I'm sure you've had the same experience. I've had a number of people say things to me like, oh, well, race in America is not that bad, and slavery was such a long time ago, and we've had a black president, and aren't we so much, you know, further down the road? And I think that the clearest empirical data that, you know, is undeniable, and that points to the fact that kind of sentiment is erroneous, that we're not nearly as far down the road as a lot of people think we are, is the wealth gap in America. As a matter of fact, many weeks ago, a part of our fireside chat, we had a conversation with Phil Vischer, and he did a video about race in America that's gotten over 8 million views. And his premise was simple. It was about the racial wealth gap. And so you know, he kind of in his video gave a history, but in your new book, The Culture of Money, man, you lean into this subject like nobody's business. Now, because of our brotherhood, I was blessed to read an advanced copy of the book. The book comes out in January of 2020, but we're going to tell people during this fireside chat about how they need to go out and pre-order the book, because I'm suspecting that you're going to have to do second and third print runs. And I know what happens when you get there. People have to wait unnecessarily too long. And this is a book that people need like right now. So, you know, let's talk about the new book, but you acknowledge that one of the clearest ways that we can see race in America and how racial injustice has perpetuated itself in communities of color is the wealth gap. But not only do you acknowledge that, you start talking about not only do we have a situation we got to address now, but in 25 years, there's something big that's coming. Unpack that, open that up for us so that we can start talking about it.
Well, Bishop Moody, you nailed it. The wealth gap. So for those of you who read up on the wealth gap, you recognize that what that is speaking of is the gap between what average white family has in terms of wealth and equity and what the average black family has. And currently in America, Bishop Moody, that gap is about 13 to 14, meaning a white family has 13 to 14 times more wealth than a black family. That's literally what that means. So the average black family in America has about $17,600 worth of wealth. Okay. The average white family over $171,000. So those are the real numbers. Now, while that is important to recognize, and as you said, Phil went to in his video, which was masterfully done, there's so many reasons for that, right? What we tend to focus on and politicize is individual responsibility. But individual responsibility, I don't care how well you manage your money, there's some systemic issues that cause that gap, such as, the difference in housing values, in housing and property and land being one of the number one ways people generate wealth. The access to capital, building a business is another way you build tremendous amounts of wealth in America. And so there are certain groups of people, particularly blacks and Hispanics, who've had limited access to capital, who've been redlined into certain housing districts. So even if you were the perfect financial steward, systemically, you still would not have amounted the same amount of wealth as a white family. Now, here's why this is important. As bad as we think this is now, we see the manifestations of this wealth gap now. In 25 years, by the year 2045, there's a staggering number I need to share with you. $68 trillion is going to exchange hands from one generation to another. Bishop Moody, how much of that wealth do you think will transfer from black families of one generation to another? Only 3%. 3%. So here's what I'm saying. I call that the great wealth transfer tsunami. You know what a tsunami is? Tsunamis wipe out. When they hit land, they wipe out for miles. And there's certain researchers who are looking at this and saying, wait a minute here, this could decimate black wealth as we know it and take an already terrible wealth gap and expand it even more, because that means if you're watching this and you're 20, let me tell you why this is important to you. In about 25 years, you'll be 45. And you're going to be competing with a group of people who will have more access to capital, who have a better head start, and will be able to give their next generation a better head start. And you may still be digging yourself out of a hole from not having had the same advantage. And so while that's the bad news, the good news is there's something we could do about it. And that's where the culture of money comes in, because the culture of money is a way for institutions who are concerned about this issue, religious institutions, social institutions, and individuals at the family level to do their part to try to cut into that wealth gap. Some of this will take politics. Some of this will take a corporate responsibility, and some of it will also take individual behavioral change. And so what I share for the Black community specifically are 3 action-oriented values. They are to know more, they are to own more, they are to pass down more. And these 3 values are what I see are the fundamental building blocks for our community to begin to do the part of addressing how we can build ourselves into a community that is wealth conscious, right? And wealth building. Because we know Black folks, we have great culture. But the one thing that we're not known for is having a culture of money. And I want to change the narrative. And I want us all to be serious about how we're going to do our part to address this wealth gap tsunami that's coming our way.
Yeah, what I love about the book and, many of the principles I've incorporated in this series, because what I love, I talked about Black Wall Street in Tulsa. And I think what's interesting now is I think we're in a day and time where more people are learning about Black Wall Street, particularly in Tulsa. The series on HBO, Watchmen, kind of popularized it. But people miss the fact that there were other Black Wall Streets. You had Rosewood, Florida. You had Harlem, New York. Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia, in a sense, was kind of one. But what people, I think, didn't really connect the dots with historically, that I think you did a phenomenal job within your book, is talking about how our ancestors were able to create those pockets of wealth was because they adopted this mindset of knowing more, owning more, and passing down more. And you even talk about how that was really the mindset that our ancestors had when they were freed from the plantation. I mean, unpack that a little bit more.
I mean, think about this. But first of all, one of the things we like to say is that the culture of money is certainly biblical. And so when you look at the history of our ancestors as a country, the one thing they wanted to do with very limited education, very limited access to resources, but spiritually, their hearts were attuned to wanting to please God. And the text that kind of everything falls upon for us is Proverbs 13:22, which is a simple principle. And you'll see all three of these wrap in that. A good people, one translation says, leave an inheritance for their grandchildren. Good people. So what it simply says is God's desire and his will is for us to manage money properly, and that we are to leave something so that transitionally from one generation to the next, there are increasing steps of progress being made financially, spiritually, values wise, and otherwise. And this is something our ancestors really brought into. Like when you look at guys like turn of century guys like W.E.B., I mean, these guys were very serious about securing and future proofing Black America through these basic things, through land ownership, through private enterprise, and through investing in what we call, in this space, closed circuit economies, right? So you mentioned, so when you talk about Greenwood, the Greenwood section of Tulsa, when you talk about Rosewood, when you talk about Atlanta, when you talk about St. Louis, there were these regions, these pockets, Durham, North Carolina was another one, where there were closed circuit economies, right? And closed circuit economy means that Blacks were not only just owning land, but Blacks were creating businesses. And if you would, I just want to read you this quote. This gets at it. In a 1912 essay, right, W.E.B. says this. He says, today there's a singular group of Black people in Durham, a Black space in Durham, where a Black man will get up in the morning and he will most likely buy a mattress from a Black man and a house that a Black man built and from lumber that Black men cut out and planned. And then he just goes through the essay, like 2 paragraphs long, of all the other things within that closed circuit economy where there's this collaborative spirit, this supportive spirit. And it was this idea of, it wasn't the phrase buy Black hadn't been coined yet, but it was this fundamental understanding our ancestors had that if we're going to get forward in this country and make any progress, we have to know more. We have to educate ourselves. We have to understand how the economy works, how life works. We have to invest in the right things, and those things were land, businesses, and if they could, equities. And that's the third thing I will always say is we got to be in that as well. But also, by him recording this, and when you read the journals of the day, there was this big concern about future-proofing Black America and passing down these values. That's why after slavery, you mainly saw Black people do one thing: pool their money together to buy land and live on.
Yeah. No, I love it. So let's dig into these 3 principles: the knowing more, owning more, and passing down more. You know, this whole notion of knowing more has kind of been a hallmark of my life. When I was teaching in this part of the Race, Truth, and Reconciliation series, I talked about Rick Cook, who was the son-in-law of Jesse Hill, who was the founder of Atlanta Life Insurance Company. He lived down the street from my dad. And, you know, I was just blessed because God kind of just, I don't know, I mean, in his providence, I mean, he knew that this day was coming and put these guys like Rick Cook in my life. I was at the time just thinking about, I want to be a good preacher and want to be a good pastor. I wasn't thinking about business.
Right.
But God sent these guys in my life, and they challenged me to literally know more. I mean, Rick Cook gave me a litany of books to read. I remember the first book he told me to read was Robert Allen's book, you know, which is a classic, Multiple Streams of Income, and George Cleason's book, you know, The Richest Man in Babylon. And at the time I was like, man, what does this have to do with ministry? But, you know, there's not a day that I don't look back on that time and say, Lord, thank you. Because if I were not exposed to those kinds of things, my life would be a lot different now. And then I juxtapose that with my mother, who was the first person in our family to go to college. And my mom learned a whole bunch of stuff. but she didn't really get a lot of wisdom and teaching on finances. And I would suspect that that's kind of the story for a number of people of color, that we don't know. We just don't know what we don't know. So, why is knowing more so critical now? I mean, I think we know it's important, I think conceptually, but in terms of experientially, why it's so critical now, I don't know that we've adequately connected the dots. But your life is an example of that. And you talk a lot about that in the book. Take us deeper into why this is the first essential principle if we're going to turn things around.
Well, and I appreciate your words, because you really talked about the Black experience and in the culture of money. I really walk people through, Bishop, how I went from being bankrupt at 21 to a millionaire in terms of net worth by 33. It was how God worked on me, and also experientially how I lived out my Black life in the world around me. And I introduced you to a lot of those characters and people, and I introduced you to them in the book. And here's why knowing more is important. Number one, the first and foremost thing is we have to know psychologically, emotionally, that there's an attachment between our money and our behaviors, and our feelings and our emotions. In other words, knowing more begins with, first of all, understanding how we do what we do and why we do what we do. You mentioned some of the exposure we have. First of all, schools don't teach on money. That's the first problem. And unfortunately, churches are often don't have the expertise in these areas to teach on it. So it becomes a broad conversation on stewardship. But in the marketplace, what's happening to us is, man, we're being attacked with all kinds of messages, and we don't know why we do what we do. Most of us can only rely upon, here it is, the experience that we've lived or those that we've watched. Now, if you were blessed enough as a Black person to be born into a family that knew how to build wealth, that had economic prosperity, God bless you. You maybe saw some good examples. But I sense that the overwhelming majority of us, and the data don't lie, have not had that experience. So here's the problem, Bishop Moody. If the number one way we learn how to manage money, how to deal with money, comes from the people that we're around and watching how they used it, and that becomes codified in our behaviors and our emotions and our values and our outlook, then you could already see that that's a bad picture. Particularly, what if you're raised in an urban area and the people with the most money were the drug dealers? What if you're raised in a family where no one really had anything other than what was in their check, and when that ran out, it was a lot of hustling to try to make things happen. And now you're an adult. Even if you get a college degree, if that's your background experience, you're going to be destroyed, as Hosea says in 4:6, by your lack of knowledge. And all that verse simply means is it's a form of self-incineration. The picture there is one almost lighting a flame unto themselves. That's what the lack of knowledge does. And so I think what your mentors are trying to get you to see the connection in Scripture is this is God's heart, because there's over 2,000 passages that mention money. So clearly it's important to God that we gain knowledge and know how to manage it. But the other thing is this. We often have this conversation about money, and we begin with looking at, money as our biggest issue. So we all kind of sound like this. If I had more money, I would do this. Well, if I had more money, almost like money will solve all of our problems. But I'm here to tell everybody here today, the lack of money is not your biggest issue. Your biggest issue is not having confidence to know what to do with every single dollar that you have. And that comes from not knowing that. So the lack of knowledge, the lack of financial education, the increased rate of financial illiteracy in this country have created a condition where, as Black people, we just aren't confident to know what to do with our dollars. And so therefore we are listening or being guided by these external influences from either our childhood or our present day. And a lot of these people don't know what to do with their money. If they did, they'd be part of the Americans that passed the basic financial literacy test. And when you look at the stats, whether it's Black or white, the same is the truth. Americans right now are failing basic financial literacy tests. And the rate of failure in the African-American community is even higher. That's what the lack of knowledge is doing. And so we don't have the financial confidence, and we don't have the financial capabilities because we just don't know enough.
Yeah. And, listening to you just reminded me that that's got to be the foundation then of why we've seen countless individuals, whether it is boxers or entertainers or football players or other pro athletes, that earn millions of dollars. And then, 25, 30 years later, they have absolutely nothing, because it's not the amount of money that makes the difference. It's first, what are you going to do with it? Do you even know what to do with it? And if not, no matter how much you have, it's not going to last.
Do you remember the 30 for 30? The one they did on Broke?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So they did this special 30 for 30 documentary, and it documented this very issue. That fundamentally, here you are making instant millionaires, signing NFL contracts. But after about 5 years, most of the kids who come from areas that are underserved, most of them were broke in 5 years. Wow. I mean, we've all heard the horror stories, right? From famous football players to entertainers who've made a lot of money. And that's why I say your lack of money or your abundance of money is not your biggest issue. You can come into a bunch of money, but if you don't have financial confidence, which comes from financial knowledge, and have developed financial capabilities, you could lose everything you have. If you're starting from little, you will never know how to take little and make a lot. Why? Because it's the lack of knowledge. So what you don't know is actually literally killing you. In my book, I tell the story of Dapper Dan, and we all know Dapper Dan and what he's done, in entertainment, right? But he tells a story in his book about going to the store as a little boy. He could read, but his father really was, not educated to the level of having reading proficiency and comprehension. And so Dan goes to the store with him, and I believe it's a watch store. And they go to shop, and the store's offering credit, just to show you the power of knowing more. So his father's ready to sign his credit agreement. So Dan listens and said, "Dad, can I read that first?" He begins to read the credit agreement and realizes, Bishop Moody, that his father, if he signs this agreement, will have paid for the price of the watch almost 7 times. It was basically what they do to us in housing communities or with mortgage lenders or auto loans, when we pay 10 times the rate, because quote unquote, we're high risk. So they saw Dan's father as high risk. It was an abusive contract. He said, "Daddy, if you sign this, you're going to end up losing more money by signing this than if we just wait to save and buy this watch." His father cried, looked at him and said, "Son, I'm so happy you can read. You helped your daddy today." See, that's one story at one level, but this is playing itself out, Bishop Moody, in our churches, in our jobs, in our businesses, time and time again. We're signing contracts we don't know. There's a financial cost to us not having financial confidence, and it's hurting us. It's hurting us, and we have to start with this, because the other principles, you can't own more if you don't know more.
Yeah.
And you can't pass down more if you can't own more. So they're progressive principles, and we have to start there.
So let's get into the second principle of owning more, because I got to tell you, there were some stats in your book that blew me away. The piece about, how owning a business reduces the multiplier. You talk about how white families are 13 times more likely to build wealth than black families. But if you own a business, you reduce that multiplier from 13 to 3. That crushed me. The stat about how over the last 200 years, all of the millionaires in America, the majority of the millionaires in America have been made through owning real estate. And that was, funny for me, because that was my first area of success in business. And I just got into real estate because that's what my dad did. That's what Rick Cook and a lot of other mentors did. So I just, was doing it and got, touched it and favored it and allowed me to be blessed through it. But I don't think I had a concept of how just that alone was changing the lives of people, and so you put it all in perspective. So, why is owning more? Because that is the clarion call that I'm saying to our church and to other people of color. As a matter of fact, recently I was able to bless a couple who just opened the second location of their business in and around Birmingham. Started as a food truck. They opened a location downtown, opened another location in Hoover. And I told them, I just had to come out and just bless it, because you guys are walking out this mandate of not only knowing more, but owning more. But in your book, you talk about how there's a sense of urgency for us right now to really embrace ownership. Let's talk about that.
Man, listen, like never before. This is really my passion, because the way God took me from bankruptcy at 21 to a net worth of over $1 million by 33 was ownership. And simply ownership is everything. guys, hear me. Ownership in the Black community is everything right now because you can't pass down what you don't own. And so therefore, ownership, frankly, is a form of freedom. That's really what makes ownership powerful. And so the three things that we need to own and urge our people to own within our community are property, businesses, and equities. Property, business, equity. And by the way, completely biblical. What does God say to the children of Israel? Numbers 33, possess the land, right? Possess, purchase, take, to own the land. So wealth, watch this, is actually owning over earning. I'm going to say that again. Please write this down if y'all taking notes. Wealth is owning over earning. I want you to really put that in your spirit. And that's why you have to own more, because y'all remember the great tsunami we opened up with, right? This wealth transfer that's going to take place, $68 trillion. But at the current rate of savings in the Black community, if we don't do something, particularly own more, pass down more, it would literally take, at the current rate of savings, Bishop Moody, 225 years.
Wow.
For the Black family to catch up with the wealth of the white family. Again, that's assuming no reparations, no political action, no corporate responsibility. If we just look at how we save versus how that community saves, and with the gap that exists, it would literally take us 225 years. Now, how do we cut into that? Again, property ownership is definitely important because why? Real estate appreciates historically over 4% a year. So property is always a safe bet. And because they don't make new land, folks. We haven't figured out how to really do that too well. And so if you look at that, yes, 90% of the country's millionaires, actually the world's millionaires, have been made over the past 20 years by real estate. But watch this. 5 white families, y'all brace yourself for this, own more land than all Black people combined.
Whoa.
I'm going to say it again just in case you missed it.
Whoa.
5 white families. I'm going to mention their names. White landowners, John Malone, Ted Turner, y'all down there in Atlanta, you understand who that is, the Emerson family, Stan Kroenke, the guy who owns the Rams, his family, and the Reed family own more land than all Black people combined. They own a combined 9 million acres.
That's crazy.
That's staggering, Bishop. That's staggering. And so watch this. If you own more land, back to the wealth gap, guys, if you own more land and you own more property, as Phil's video showed, housing inequality is one of the key factors in rising wealth since 1950, which means housing inequality. It just simply means if their land appreciates at a higher rate for whatever systemic reasons where they live, the zip codes are priced higher, their value higher. As that appreciation increases more dramatically in those neighborhoods, that wealth gap expands even more. So we need to get into that ownership game. The second piece is that business game. And I'll just say this. Yes, owning a business will increase a Black family's wealth by almost 4 to 5 times over their lifetime. A successful business, obviously, we assume that. But if we do this right, owning businesses and supporting Black businesses actually will have the greatest effect on the wealth gap from our standpoint beyond whatever other public support we can do. In other words, we can take a wealth gap that looks like, I don't know, 171 to 17,000 and change that to maybe 171,000 of wealth for a white family to more like, 60, 70,000 of wealth for a Black family. Again, it won't be equal, but it'll start to cut into the gap and give us more even playing field.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. So now you blow my mind with the 5 families. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. Okay. So, in light of that, let's talk about passing down more, because what I loved is you talked about finding your legacy motivators. And, that's what my kids have been for me. I'm just at this stage in my life, you go through, I think, early on in your life where you want the trappings of success, right? For you, you want to be able to get the house or to get the car or whatever. I talked about getting certain watches. I have a watch thing, but yeah, but you get to a stage in your life where you recognize, you know what, there's nothing to that. Like, and for me, it started happening when I started having children. Like when I started thinking about them and what kind of life did I want them to live, particularly after I'm gone? They in many ways kind of became my legacy motivator to pass down more because, I want them to have a head start much further than I had, which I'm sure, all parents on some level want for their children. But the real question is, are we doing what we need to do now to position that? So talk about why this is that third final principle that is so critical if we're going to make this difference financially.
Well, first, let me just say this, and Bishop, I don't think we can say this enough to our people right now. And by the way, when we have this conversation, and I use terms like Black churches or Black people in churches, I think there are white pastors who need to embrace this conversation. If you're pastoring Black folks, you need to understand what's happening in that community.
Yep.
And so you can't just ask for them to come to your church and then not engage in understanding why these principles are important and joining in this kind of culture of money movement. But I will say this, Black people, you are amazing. And I want to say that to you because as understanding systemic issues, which Bishop Moody has brilliantly laid out for you in this series, look at what we've done without any advantages. Can you imagine for a second, please? I just want to close my eyes for a second. I want to dream of a future. Imagine if the obstacles are moved out of our way, what we can do. Oh, my Lord. Mm. I'm living in Malachi 4:6, Bishop, when I say that, because that's where the Lord says, and I will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children.
Yeah. And the children.
So he's speaking of, yeah, that's right. He's speaking of a generational disconnect, almost, i.e., a gap. And so he wants there to be healing and transgenerational healing. But he says that somebody in the primary generation, the first generation, must make that first turn. And so for me, like you, I speak of internal motivators, and I describe two motivators. One, I call them drivers. So your success driver, and that is, what is your why behind your success? Like, what's the number one reason you want to succeed? For me, growing up in the hood, man, I loved my mama. I loved my dad. They struggled. They tried to give us the best. So my mother, Emma, was my number one success driver. My kids and my wife weren't the reason I'm success because I wanted to help my mother live a better life long before I met them, right? Long before they came in. So Emma was my success driver. She was the why behind my success. I wanted to get her a washing machine. I wanted to get her into a safer neighborhood. I wanted to have her riding in a nice car. I wanted my dad to be able to not work so hard. But then there's the second driver I call the internal thing. It's called your legacy driver. That's the what's in your heart thing, right? The thing behind your why. Like, why are you building legacy in the first place? And I think this is what Malachi is seeing, that there's got to be something in your heart that turns to see the future. And we have to stop living for the day. And so for me, it was when I had my first son, Deshaun. And because when I saw his Black skin, and I'm not making this over dramatic, I looked at him and I literally said, with his Black skin, if I don't give him something to start with, better than what I had, it's going to be hard for him. I knew systemically there would be injustices, and I knew I couldn't stop all of them, but I wanted to do my part to mitigate them. I wanted to turn my heart. So my heart turned when I saw him. And then as my other children, Destiny and Dorian and Dapper added, my heart just keeps turning. So I think there are 4 things we got to do to pass down more. We have to identify why we want to succeed, a success driver. We have to, identify a legacy driver so that we have the passion to understand the why that God has shown us. But I think there's 2 other important things that we miss, Bishop, when we talk about legacy and passing down more. We instantly migrate towards resources. But the 2 other things we need? We need to share vision and values.
Yes.
Because vision is what we see for the next generation. And I think we're missing an opportunity to speak over the next generation and tell them what to do with the resources you leave them. It kind of sounds like this, like, I'd like to make sure you invest in real estate with what I leave you. You got to speak that over them. And then you have to share values, because values are what we believe. It's how we roll. It really is culture. So if we're going to shape a culture of money, these values must be passed down, that I don't just want this generation to turn. I want every generation to keep turning towards the next generation so that we all keep passing down. Listen, we're going to own more. We're going to know more. We're going to pass down more. This is what God wants us to do, because we're going to leave a legacy whether we try to or not. And I'd rather we leave one of abundance rather than leave one of poverty.
Come on, man. Yeah. So let me raise this last question for you, because I think that there are a number of people that, particularly when you start talking about changing their financial future and the urgency behind it. There's a lot of people that will read your book. And guys, let me just pause here and say, please get this book. As a matter of fact, Bishop Salter, what's the URL that people need to go out to? And I want to, let's get it in now. And then I'm going to make sure you stress this again, because I am screaming and teaching and preaching to all of the folk in my tribe that's connected to TWC, that's in our, ecosystem. This is a must read. It's The Culture of Money. God. Tell people where to get it.
You can just go to thecultureofmoney.com. Bishop, we've set it up because what we're trying to do, and frankly, you were one of the ones, this book has been a 7-year process. I wrestled with God on it. I actually did want to do it. God made me do it. He pushed it out, and my team and my younger sister, she really ministered to me and said, you have to put this out. Because I see it really as a tool for us to keep going back to. So you can go to thecultureofmoney.com, and Bishop, what we set up there is not just a way for you to just pre-order the book, but it's going to be a resource site for churches and for individuals to continue to grow this. One of the things we're giving away, if you go there and you've enjoyed the mailing list, is a way for you to identify what we call money scripts. And money scripts are the things that kind of autoplay in your head that cause you to do what you do. If you go to thecultureofmoney.com, we're going to help you walk away with, in a very easy worksheet that you can do at home, with understanding financially what scripts are playing in your head. Because if you identify them, you'll be in a better position to know more, to own more, and to pass down more. So thank you for mentioning that. But go to thecultureofmoney.com. We really appreciate that.
And will people be able, your newsletters, when we start talking about knowing more, I know that you've been creating and working on kind of newsletters that have important links to different sites that people can go to learn more and just grow in terms of just their financial knowledge. Can they also be able to access that from The Culture of Money?
You'll be able to access the newsletter from The Culture of Money. We have, we're releasing a group discussion guide so that in small groups and in community groups, to be able to unpack this and really contextualize it. But here's the big win. Is we're also partnering with other organizations to release a wealth track curriculum. The wealth track curriculum are 12 courses designed to help you know more, own more, pass down more. We'll be dealing with everything from credit to investing to financial psychology. And we're going to unpack this for you and give you, and by the way, what makes this different is it's not just information, Bishop. We have measurements, because again, we can't say we're going to know more and it just be something, cathartic. We need to have measurements to build our financial confidence, to know, oh, my literacy score has increased from X to Y. And we're going to help you track that. We're going to track that with you, because we want to help you, your church, and our community to be able to have some benchmarks so that we can go forward. So again, this is a total platform for us to try to hit this issue from every angle.
I love it. So I want to ask you to put this all in context, because I started going here and then I said, you know what, let me detour. Let's talk about where people can go. And then I'm asking you to do that at the end. But there are a myriad of ways that people receive this kind of instruction, encouragement. Some people will say, yes, I'm going to get after it. There are some people who will receive this because they've been so frustrated or disappointed financially. Things maybe haven't happened for them the way that they quite desire it. And some people are just resigned to stay in the rut, right? Well, my mama never had anything. My family never did anything. This is just the way that I guess my life is going to go. And then there's another group of people that I think have the desire. They don't have the know-how. They may not have the resources, but they're looking for the inspiration and the mentorship, but more than that, the example that it's possible. I remember earlier in my life reflecting on people like Rick Cook and others, and what they did beyond what they gave me knowledge-wise was that they were living examples that it's possible. There were certain pastors who were even business mentors in my life, and their lifestyle, what they were able to do, was just an example that it's possible. And one of the things that I'll say publicly to you that you and I have talked about privately is I'm proud of you in this book because I've known that you are a financial juggernaut on it. It's really unfortunate in the church world. We have to almost kind of avoid that because people will put labels on you. If you really talk about business and business success and what's possible, you got so many different groups in the church. Some people will label you prosperity guy, and that could be the furthest thing from your heart.
Yep.
And it's ironic too, because, finances is like that felt need area that everybody, I often say that it's two big issues in the church that we want more of, but we don't want to talk about. And that's money and sex, right?
That's right.
And so there's this hypocrisy that, people are struggling, particularly people of color are struggling in this area. But then if someone comes along with credibility and integrity that wants to help people, and I'm not talking about charlatans and quacks, but I'm talking about somebody with credibility and integrity and a proven track record, oftentimes we don't even make them feel comfortable. So they shy away from the very thing that we need. And one of the things that I'm so proud of you in this whole move is that I kind of had a sense in my heart many, many years ago that the world and the kingdom needed you in an even greater way. And I know coming from all of the business success that you've had and coming into pastoring, dealing with us is a challenge. But here's what I want to ask you to do, and you can do it any way you like. But you do in your book. I mean, you put it out there. I mean, you tell some amazing stories about your success. You share some stuff in the book that I didn't even know about, and I read it, and my mouth dropped open. Right? I knew you loved Tesla. You talked me into getting a Tesla for my wife. I had no idea you were able to invest in the company, Negro, early on in a private equity space and ride it up. I was like, oh my gosh. But those are the kind of stories you tell in the book that I think everybody will benefit from. But for the sake of people who I think are in those other groups that I talked about that need an example or that need hope and inspiration, would you, however you want to tell it? And I want you to, we're in a cyberspace, but this is a safe space, right? There's no judgment. There's no envy. There's no jealousy. But tell your story, because I just think, Salter, what God has used you to do globally is so needed. There are young people who may be watching this Fireside chat, who need to see a Black man who's done it well, done it right, done it in a way that's honored God, honored his wife, honored his children, because that will tell them that it's possible. There are people who have, been struggling financially, who have just resigned to struggle financially the rest of their life. And that's not the will of God for their life. And you have walked this road and done it well. So I want you to just tell us your story. I know it, but a lot of people don't know it. And this may be, if you've got some church folks, some impact people watching, I don't even know if your church really understands the gift that you are. I don't think they really do. But
yeah, they don't. And I think part of it's my fault, Bishop. And I think some of it is, since you say it's a safe space, I mean, this is, you lined it up perfectly. Some of it has been, I felt, at least in my ministry life, a bit of an oddball, because I think theologically, we've always limited fivefold ministry giftings to operating only in the pulpit, when they're literally just fivefold ministry giftings operating in the world for the benefit of the kingdom of God. And so I've always sensed myself in the fivefold, even prior to taking the pulpit, that ultimately God called me to be a model, example, a teacher, that teacher, that shepherd, to show others a more excellent way. And I think as a result of my upbringing. So, I mean, honestly, guys, for those of you out there who feel like this, trying to turn your financial situation around is not worth the effort and that it's not possible. As Bishop said, I am that example for you. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. We grew up in Newark, New Jersey. I'm the product of two blue collar parents My dad owned a business, but it was an auto. He was a mechanic. He had a little garage with a couple lifts, and he would work and fix cars. And one of five children, and we didn't have a terrible living condition, but we didn't have a silver spoon in our mouth. We had to work for everything we had, and so I mean, there's just so many stories I could tell, Bishop, but I relate to everybody. I mean, we've had seasons where we've had to, go find money for the light bill, where we had to rob Peter to pay Paul, where we had to. I remember us even putting our money together as kids. My mother would have us all working. We'd all work, and we would sit at the dining room table, Bishop Moody, and this is how we worked as a family. My mother would teach us that whatever we do, we're going to get further ahead together. And we would take all of our little side jobs, raking leaves and carrying groceries for old ladies up and down the street to whatever else we could do. And then what would happen is my mother would take all that money, we bring it home, she put it on the table, and she would do this. She would divide it up. She would say, this part is for God. We take our tithing out. And then she would say, this part is for the house. Because you live here, we got to all work together. Nobody has an abundance here, so we're gonna get out this situation together. And she would take a piece for the house for groceries. She would give us a little spending money, and then make us bless our brothers and sisters. And so this is kind of the DNA that's in me. So while we didn't have a lot, while we struggled in the city of Newark to kind of find our place and our means, we had that. And I just remember thinking, Bishop, man, I just need to try to get out of this situation. God, I want you to do something. I remember my mother praying those prayers. And I'm telling you, my parents got one thing right. They said, guys, you need to know more. You got to educate yourself. We'll do whatever we need to do to make sure that you educate yourself. And that was our goal. But here's the problem. And most of us face this. What I've quickly found out after I got my college degree is a college degree is not enough for a Black person. Because just because you have a college degree, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to know how to get yourself out of the financial conditioning that's taken place from a childhood where you may have had lack, where you may have not had the means. And quickly, I found myself after that with my first job, Bishop, spending a lot on credit, spending a lot on myself. And I ended up having to file bankruptcy. When I married my wife, Terry, we got married young. I was married at 22. By 21, I had to file bankruptcy. Why did I have to file bankruptcy? Because I literally had sheriffs serving garnishment notices at my corporate job in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. Almost once a week, somebody would come in. It was only the hand of God. I'm telling you, God clearly had this testimony for me to bring out, because I probably should have been fired. I was like the only Black guy in the department. And every week, HR is calling me in because there's some sheriff in the office serving another garnishment. So I just kind of lived a life that was beneath my privilege. I didn't grow up with meager means, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying I didn't have it, I didn't know, and it damaged me, and it hurt me, and my degrees couldn't help me. I needed to get more than just making more money, and that's why I say to everybody, it's not just about making money. So Terry and I started in a hole, and that bankruptcy was a complete hole. But from bankruptcy, I'm telling you, this is what the culture of money does. And I'll walk you through the process I went through. There's a reconditioning that has to take place, because we can't get healed, Bishop, until we make a proper diagnosis. If you go to the doctor, the first thing is to get the right diagnosis. And the diagnosis is poverty was just affecting me, man. It was affecting my well-being. It was affecting my outlook. It was affecting my value system. And I needed God to deliver me from that, from whatever that was. And out of that bankruptcy, I began to realize that I needed more. And so I just began to search more. I began to educate myself more, not just in scripture, but in financial things. And my career took off, and I did really well in corporate America. But ultimately, about 10 years after corporate America, God gave me this idea for a business called Professional Risk Solutions. It's an insurance brokerage firm. I started that business with literally just very little money. But God blessed that business, Bishop Moody, to achieve his 5-year business plan in less than a year. And now, as of this day, of this broadcast, Professional Risk Solutions is not my only business, but it's my largest business, and it will be celebrating its 19th year in business. Let me say this again. I'm a Black man who was born in the inner city with a large family, meager means, very little financial education. But I've owned a business successful for 19 years. And just to give you a size of scale, and I often don't say this because I don't want people to take it the wrong way. We are literally a unicorn, Bishop Moody. We are the largest African-American owned insurance brokerage in the world. I'm going to say it again, in the world. So we place nearly $100 million in insurance transactions a year. It is an incredible business. It is set up my family to enjoy being able to help people in an unusual way. It helped take us out of poverty. And that's why I say ownership is everything. If you trust God more and we begin to do the work on ourselves and educate ourselves, know more, grow more, and get everything God has for us, Bishop, I just believe my story can be repeated in the lives of everybody listening to this.
Man, that's why I was so excited for this conversation, because thank you, number one, for sharing that testimony, because there are some people watching this that needed what you just shared. And family, let me say, he shares even more. I was teasing him about Tesla and all of that. He tells those stories in the book, The Culture of Money. It is a must read. And I've already shared with Bishop Salter that when the curriculum and the wealth track stuff comes out, we're going to be running those plays at TWC. God has been waiting on this. And brother, I'm so proud of you and so excited for how you are going to impact the world with this material. So family, it's been a great conversation, but this is really just beginning. Make sure you go out to the site. I'm going to give you a second to point us to the right site here in a second, but make sure you go out, sign up, pre-order the book, get the resources. He has been a blessing to my life, my wife and I, our children's lives, and now he's put it all down on paper, and this is going to bless you. So Bishop Salter, where is, because I don't want to mess it up. This is too important. I know it's The Culture of Money, but it's just give us .com.org.
Thecultureofmoney.com. Thecultureofmoney.com. Now, it's something else I would love for you guys to do. There is a pledge. So if you go to thecultureofmoney.com, the other thing I'd like for you to do is to take the pledge. And you don't even need to read the book to take the pledge. But I do want you to consider prayerfully to take the pledge. The pledge is, I promise to know more. I promise to own more. I promise to pass down more so that I can leave an inheritance. And that's the pledge. And the reason why that's important is we want as many Black people as possible taking that pledge, because we can all encourage each other. If you know you're one of a million who've taken the same pledge, then what we now have, folks, is community, right? And so we want this to be a community. And Bishop Moody, thank you so much again for offering your church. We can't wait to train TCOM coaches to partner with the Worship Center and train your coaches to also be able to be a financial resource of mentors and help you create mentors in your house. We're looking so forward to that day. Thank you so much for allowing The Culture of Money and thecultureofmoney.com to be on this platform.
Amen. Amen. Well, family, there you have it. Bishop DeAndre Salter, money maven, friend, brother, gift to the body of Christ. What a phenomenal conversation we've had. Thanks for being a part of this fireside chat, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, family.